During my freshman year of college, I was the poorest kid in my class. There was a girl in our class named Su Qingyan. Her family owned mines. She was filthy rich. Once, while playing Truth or Dare out of boredom, she lost. The penalty was 100,000 yuan. Everyone thought she'd refuse, but she just pulled out her phone right then and there and transferred the money without a second thought. With a simple note, a bet is a bet. From that day on, my life completely derailed from its original path. At the cafeteria, I started eating the seafood meals I never even dared to look at before. I started ordering cakes from the mall every day. From a part-time waiter, I became a regular who sat in the corner of the library every day. Those expensive civil service exam prep books, I bought them all at once without a second thought. She never asked how much I spent, and I never explained anything to her either. We were like two people from parallel worlds, who, just because of a bet, ended up with a fragile, fleeting intersection. On graduation day, 4 years later, I checked my bank account balance. There was only 3.8 yuan left. Her money was just enough for me to get my degree and a job offer from my dream company. Another 4 years passed. Under a city overpass, I saw a figure curled up in a tattered quilt. Her face was covered in grime, her clothes torn and filthy, but those eyes, I could never forget them for the rest of my life. Su Qingyan. I heard her family went bankrupt. Her parents took all the money and fled, leaving her all alone. To shoulder all their debts, I squatted down, reached out my hand, and said in a calm but firm voice, "Come with me." My memories drifted back to 8 years ago, when my phone rang. I was on the 3rd floor of the cafeteria, scarfing down a bowl of mixed rice. With a free bowl of seaweed egg drop soup, my phone screen lit up, displaying 2 words, Lin Yu. I answered the call. A grain of rice still stuck to my finger. Chen Yan, where are you? Hurry up and get to Starlight KTV, room 208. It's Qingyan's birthday. We're all just waiting on you. I frowned. Su Qingyan, the most radiant girl in our class. What did her birthday have to do with someone like me? I had to pinch pennies just to survive. What connection could we possibly have? Maybe I shouldn't go. I still have things to do. Cut the crap. Qingyan specifically asked for you. Just try not showing up. Lin Yu's tone left no room for refusal. He hung up right after. I looked at the half-eaten bowl of white rice, suddenly losing my appetite. I didn't have many friends to begin with. Offending Lin Yu would only make me more isolated in class. I put down my chopsticks, stood up, and walked out of the cafeteria. The early autumn wind carried a chill. I pulled my faded, worn-out jacket tighter around myself. The starlight was brilliant. It wasn't far from the school. I walked for over 20 minutes. The waiter at the door looked at me. With a hint of judgment and disdain, I couldn't care less. I went straight up to the 3rd floor and pushed open the door to VIP room 208. The door wasn't fully closed. Inside, the music was deafening. When I pushed the door open, over 20 people were sitting around. The table was covered with fruit platters, snacks, and imported liquor. The atmosphere was loud and lively. Su Qingyan sat right in the middle of the sofa, wearing a light-colored dress, her long hair cascading down her shoulders. She looked like a princess surrounded by her admirers. Seeing me, Lin Yu waved and called out, "Chen Yan, over here." I walked over and quietly sat in the corner of the sofa. No one paid any attention to me. Everyone's eyes were glued to Su Qingyan, singing, joking around, telling jokes. The air reeked of money and excitement. Meanwhile, I felt like a completely out-of-place outsider. A while later, someone complained that singing was getting boring and suggested playing Truth or Dare. The whole crowd immediately cheered in agreement. An empty bottle spun rapidly on the table. I prayed silently in my heart, "Please don't land on me." A few times, the bottle narrowly missed me, just as I breathed a sigh of relief. The mouth of the bottle stopped right in front of Su Qingyan. The whole room erupted in cheers. Qingyan, Truth or Dare? The one asking was Zhao Kai, a notorious show-off, who always loved hovering around Su Qingyan. Su Qingyan had had a bit to drink, her cheeks flushed with a faint pink. Dare. Zhao Kai rolled his eyes around, deliberately sweeping his gaze toward me, and raised his voice. "Then I'll give you an easy one. Qingyan, do you dare to make a bet with the guy sitting behind you?" Chen Yan. Everyone's eyes instantly snapped to me. My whole body stiffened. I panicked, not knowing what to do. Su Qingyan slowly turned her head and glanced at me. There wasn't a hint of mockery in her eyes, only the signature arrogance of a rich heiress, and a curiosity about everything in the world. "Bet on what?" Zhao Kai smirked, his tone laced with provocation. "Bet on whether you dare to transfer 100,000 yuan to him right now. How about it?" The room suddenly fell dead silent. Then it erupted into even louder roars of laughter. "Damn, Zhao Kai. Are you crazy? It's just a joke."
Haha, exactly.
There is no way Qingyan would actually do it. This is way too absurd. Zhao Kai shrugged, looking disdainful.
What's wrong? Don't dare to.
If you don't dare, The penalty is 3 glasses of wine. He was doing this on purpose. He wanted to make Su Qingyan lose face, and he wanted to see a poor kid like me squirm. Everyone stared intently at Su Qingyan. I felt my face burning up. My palms were drenched in sweat. 100,000 yuan. To them, it was just a number to joke about. But just a few days ago, my mom called, saying we were still 10,000 yuan short for medical bills. She was so worried she couldn't sleep all night. I sat there like a clown put on display. My dignity was being trampled underfoot with their money. Su Qingyan didn't say a word. She just looked at me quietly. Her gaze was completely calm. No mockery, no pity. As if she was weighing the value of this bet. Lin Yu nudged my arm. Bro, don't take it seriously, he whispered. Zhao Kai is just being an idiot. There is no way Qingyan will actually transfer the money. But I couldn't just brush it off. When your dignity is blatantly provoked, when your most desperate circumstances are laid bare on the table, how can you pretend not to care?
Right then, Su Qingyan suddenly smiled.
She said softly.
Sure.
She picked up her phone from the table and opened her banking app. Everyone around was stunned. They thought she was just putting on an act. She looked up at me and asked softly, "What's your phone number?" The private room was dead silent. Only the music played on pointlessly. Everyone looked at Su Qingyan, then back at me. Zhao Kai's smile froze on his face. Lin Yu was dumbfounded too, his mouth hanging open, speechless. I felt the blood rush straight to my head. My throat was completely dry. I couldn't utter a single word. Su Qingyan was very patient. She held up her phone and asked again,
What's your number?
Almost mechanically, I rattled off a string of numbers. She looked down, her fingers tapping quickly on the screen. She was incredibly focused. If she were just completing some trivial, everyday task. The people in the room exchanged bewildered glances. Someone whispered, Shez not actually transferring it? Is she? That's 100,000 yuan. Going this far just to save face. Who knows? We'll never understand the world of the rich. A few seconds later, Su Qingyan put her phone down. She looked up at Zhao Kai, her voice calm.
Done.
Zhao Kai's face turned pale, then green. He stammered, Qingyan. Su Qingyan cut him off, her eyes completely unbothered. A bet is a bet. With that, she picked up her wine glass and downed it. She didn't spare me another glance. It was as if this whole thing was just an insignificant game that she had already moved past. In my pocket, my phone suddenly buzzed. I reached into my pocket with trembling hands. The screen lit up. A bank notification popped up, glaringly bright. Your account ending in XXX has just received 100,000.00 CNY. Current balance, 100,092.37 CNY. That long string of numbers stung my eyes. 92.37 yuan was my entire remaining living allowance for the month. Adding this 100,000 yuan, the total was 100,092.37 yuan. I hurriedly shoved the phone back into my pocket. My palms were covered in cold sweat. I stood up, ignoring the complicated looks from everyone around me. I turned and walked toward the door. Lin Yu called out from behind me. Chen Yan, where are you going? I didn't look back. I quickened my pace and left Starlight KTV. The cold wind outside hit my face, cutting into my skin like a knife. I shivered. My mind was completely blank. I didn't know where to go. I just walked aimlessly down the street for a long time, passing by a 24-hour convenience store. For some reason, I stepped inside. I stood in front of the shelves for a long time. Finally, I grabbed the most expensive imported cup noodles.
A sausage!
And a braised egg. At the checkout, the cashier said it was 18 yuan. I paid without a second thought. Before, I only dared to buy the 3 yuan instant noodles. I wouldn't even dare to add a sausage. I carried my food back to the dorm. The room was empty. Lin Yu and the others weren't back yet. I boiled some water and made the noodles. The steam rose thickly, blurring my vision. Only then did I feel like I was truly alive. I sat down at my desk, picked up my phone again, and stared at that text message. I counted the digits over and over. 100,000 yuan. This money could save my mom from worrying about medical bills. It could save me from begging for free soup at the cafeteria. It could save me from living at the mercy of others' moods. It could let me live like a normal person. I finished the bowl of noodles, drinking every last drop of the broth. Then I took out a brand new notebook. And a pen. My hands were still shaking slightly, but my eyes were completely clear. On the first page of the notebook, I solemnly wrote down 3 words. 4-year plan. 4 years of college meant 48 months in total. I set my monthly living allowance at 850 yuan. 48 months would be 40,800 yuan. Tuition for 1 year was 5,500 yuan. The remaining 3 years would be 16,500 yuan. Grad school prep materials and major related books were estimated at 6,000 yuan. 10,000 yuan to send home for my mom's medical bills. and miscellaneous expenses like class funds, ID photos, and other fees estimated at 1,200 yuan. I meticulously calculated every single expense. The total cost came to 74,500 yuan. The remaining 25,500 yuan would be my emergency fund. Unless it was an absolute last resort, I wouldn't touch it. I recorded every expense with crystal clarity. I knew this 100,000 yuan didn't just fall from the sky. It was the bet money Su Qingyan had lost. But more importantly, it was my lifeline for the next 4 years. I had to put it to good use. Use it to survive until graduation, get my college degree, find a decent job, and then pay this money back to her with interest to redeem my trampled dignity. When I finished writing the last stroke, it was almost dawn. Outside the window, the morning light was beginning to break. I looked at the dense lines of my plan in the notebook, feeling strangely at peace, as if I had finally found the direction for the road ahead. The next day, on my way to class, I ran into Su Qingyan at the entrance of the lecture hall. She was standing there, laughing and chatting with some girls. She was wearing a white dress, looking completely different from her appearance at the KTV yesterday. Still incredibly dazzling. When she saw me, she paused for a moment. A barely noticeable flash of surprise crossed her eyes. Then she quickly returned to her calm demeanor. As if nothing had ever happened, she turned her head and continued chatting with her friends. I lowered my head too and hurried into the classroom. I didn't dare to look at her again. Between us lay 100,000 yuan, and that 100,000 yuan was all there was. There wasn't a single shred of unnecessary emotion, just an absurd bet, and a promise I was bound to fulfill. Between us lay 90,000 yuan, a massive gap in social status, and an unspoken agreement. I knew she didn't want to bring it up again, and neither did I. We were like two parallel lines, each moving along our own trajectory, neither bothering the other. Yet, because of that stupid remark, an unbreakable bond had formed. My life began to change, little by little. The first change was my meals. I no longer went to the third floor to beg for free soup. Instead, I went to the fried rice stall on the second floor and ordered a 30 yuan seafood rice bowl. The first time I ordered it, the lunch lady even paused for a moment, giving me a double take. She probably didn't expect that the guy who usually only ate white rice with free soup would actually order such an expensive dish. I paid with a straight face and carried my tray to a secluded corner. I ate very slowly, savoring every single bite. This was what I had traded my dignity for. I couldn't waste it. That night, my mom called. Her voice was still full of worry. Xiaoyan, I tried borrowing money for your dad's medical bills again, but they still wouldn't lend it to me. What are we going to do? Mom, stop borrowing. I have money here. My voice was calm. I tried my best to sound reassuring. The other end of the line was silent for a long time. My mom's voice choked up.
Where did you get the money?
You didn't do anything foolish out there, did you? I don't need your money. Just focus on your studies. That's all that matters. Mom, don't worry. I didn't do anything foolish. It's a national scholarship from the school. It's a full 10,000 yuan, plus the money I saved up from my part-time jobs. It's enough.
I lied.
Without blushing, without skipping a beat, I couldn't tell my mom. The truth was, I was afraid she'd worry. And even more afraid she'd think I was accepting someone else's charity. Losing my backbone, after hanging up, I immediately went to the bank and transferred the 10,000 yuan. When I stepped out of the bank, the sky was exceptionally clear. I looked up, eat the blue sky, feeling the heavy boulder in my heart finally lift. I gently crossed out the first note in my notebook. From then on, I stopped tutoring, and I stopped helping out in the cafeteria kitchen. I dedicated all my time to studying. Every morning, I was the first one at the library, and at night, I was the last to leave. I buried myself in piles of books, devouring thick major-related textbooks, and writing dense pages of notes. All because I wanted to get into grad school, so I could find a good job, so I could pay off my debt to Su Qingyan as soon as possible. Su Qingyan and I were still classmates. During large lectures, she sat in the front row. I sat in the back row, looking at her back from afar. I never took the initiative to approach him. During seminars, we were occasionally assigned to the same group. He never spoke to me, and I never tried to strike up a conversation with him either. We were like the most familiar of strangers. Once, a group discussion required 2 people. Pipper group to present. The teacher assigned us randomly. He and I ended up in the same group. The other students all looked at us with meaningful expressions. They were probably recalling what happened at the KTV that day. These kinds of baseless rumors had been quietly spreading around the class. Some said we were dating. Some said I was his sugar baby. Others said he just saw me as a plaything to pass the time. Su Qingyan acted like he hadn't heard any of those rumors. He also seemed oblivious to the stares from our classmates. He just looked at me, smiled, and said, "You handle the content for the last 3 slides.
I'll take care of the rest. All right.
I nodded. I didn't say another word. Throughout the whole process, we didn't have any unnecessary interaction. I found the materials. I made the PPT. As presentation day approached, I sent him the finished file. He only replied with one word: received. The next day on the podium, I presented my part. He presented his. Our coordination couldn't be called perfect, but there were no mistakes either. The teacher gave us a pretty good grade. After stepping down, he walked in front. I followed behind. As we neared the classroom door, he suddenly stopped. He slowly turned his head and glanced at me. Good job. This was the first thing he had said to me since that night at the KTV. It wasn't a question, nor was it a request. It was just an evaluation, as calm as could be, devoid of any emotion. He nodded as if that settled it. Didn't say another word, turned around, and walked away. His back was as arrogant as ever, just as polished as he was at the KTV that day. It seemed that those 100,000 yuan really were just an insignificant game to him. He never cared. But I did. I cared more than anyone else. That 100,000 yuan was the price of my self-esteem. I couldn't treat it like a game. I went back to my dorm and opened my 4-year plan notebook next to Su Qingyan's name. I wrote down 2 words. One-time collaboration, then I crossed it out forcefully. Stroke by stroke, with all my might. It felt like a ritual, a reminder to myself that, between him and me, aside from that 100,000 yuan bet, there was absolutely nothing. No feelings. No debts, only a salvation that I had to achieve. During my sophomore year, through my relentless hard work, I received a 9,000 yuan national scholarship. I haven't touched this money yet. I kept it intact in a separate bank account. This was an unexpected income outside my plan. It was also the starting capital for my repayment plan. I was still strictly following my 4-year plan. My monthly living expenses were 850 yuan. Not a penny more, not a penny less. I used a small notebook to record every single expense, calculating accurately down to the last cent. Buying a pen cost 1.8 yuan. A meal cost 13 yuan. Class funds cost 20 yuan. Even buying a 2 yuan bottle of water would be carefully jotted down. Li Yu often teased me. Shen Yan, you live like a robot. You're not short on money anymore. Why do you need to be so calculating? What do you even get out of this? I had no way to explain it to him. He didn't understand, and he never would. That 100,000 yuan was never just money to me. It was a noose tightened around my neck. The other end of the rope was in Su Qingyan's hands. Only by relying on myself to snap this rope bit by bit could I regain the freedom to breathe. Only then could I truly hold my head high. In the second semester of my sophomore year, the school held a sports meet. Every class had a mandatory registration quota. The instructor couldn't find anyone to sign up for the 3,000-meter race. So Lin Yu went ahead and put my name down. Shen Yan, you go to the library every day. If not, you're out on the track jogging. Your stamina must be great. Just consider it winning glory for the class. Okay? Lin Yu said, looking a bit helpless. I didn't object. Running didn't cost money anyway. Plus, it was good exercise, and it built willpower. To me, it wasn't a bad thing. The weather on the day of the race was exceptionally hot. The sun scorched the earth. The air was thick with a stifling, unbearable heat. I wore the most ordinary sports shorts and a tank top. Standing at the starting line, I was surrounded by classmates, wearing professional gear and proper sportswear. I looked completely out of place the moment the starting gun went off. I didn't rush forward. I just kept my own pace and gradually ran outward. I wasn't aiming for a rank. I just wanted to cross the finish line safely, just like how I faced my own life. Not rushing for success, just aiming to take each step steadily. The gunshot echoed. I kept my own pace and gradually ran outward. The sunlight was blinding. Sweat quickly soaked through my tank top,
rolling down my cheeks,
dripping onto the track and evaporating instantly. By the final lap, I was completely exhausted. Sweat blurred my vision. My lungs burned like they were on fire. My legs felt as heavy as lead. Every step took all the strength I had left. As I passed the grandstand, I subconsciously looked up. Su Qingyan was sitting with the student council officers, wearing matching uniforms, wearing a white baseball cap, sitting up perfectly straight with an outstanding aura. He seemed to be saying something to the person next to him. A faint smile played on his lips. His eyes crinkled in amusement. Under the sun, his skin was so pale it practically glowed. So dazzling, I didn't dare look straight at him. He wasn't looking at the track. He wasn't looking at me. He didn't even bother to watch the intense race. In his world, this race that I was pouring my heart and soul into probably wasn't as important as a casual chat with his friends. I looked away, suppressing the vague bitterness in my heart. I gritted my teeth and kept running forward. I knew the distance between him and me. It was just like this 3,000-meter track. I was down here, giving it my all, looking pathetic and struggling, while he would forever sit up high, high above, untainted by the dust of the world. The moment I crossed the finish line, I collapsed onto the ground, gasping heavily for air. My entire body felt drained of strength. I didn't even have the energy to lift my hand and wipe my sweat. Lin Yu ran over quickly to help me up. He handed me a bottle of water. His voice was full of surprise. Chen Yan, that was awesome. 4th place. You almost medaled. I didn't expect your stamina to be this good. I took the water bottle, twisted the cap off, and drank in huge gulps, swallowing mouthful after mouthful. I couldn't say a single word. Only the sound of my heavy panting remained. I looked toward the chairman's podium. Su Qingyan was no longer there. Only an empty seat was left. A sudden, strange sense of loss washed over me, but I also felt somewhat relieved. We never belonged to the same world to begin with. We shouldn't have too many entanglements. That night, I returned to my dorm, opened my 4-year plan notebook, and on the repayment plan page, solemnly wrote down a line. Repayment plan. Starting capital, 9,000 yuan.
Goal. Exactly 100,000 yuan.
This was no longer a pipe dream, nor was it an unreachable goal. I had laid the first bricks. I had a direction to move forward. As long as I persevered to the end, there would come a day when I paid off this debt. Then I could stand before him with my head held high, with dignity. Time flew by. My life felt like it had been pre-programmed, boring and disciplined. Go into the library, day after day. Year after year, I rarely participated in group activities, and I rarely chatted with anyone. My classmates were mostly used to me keeping to myself. They only knew that. Chen Yan was a weirdo with terrifyingly good grades. Silent, solitary, but incredibly hardworking. Only I knew clearly that I didn't dare stop, and I couldn't stop. I was afraid that if I stopped, it'd be crushed by that massive debt. Afraid that if I stopped, I'd return to the destitution of the past, to that lowly version of myself. Afraid that I'd never have the chance to pay off this debt, to redeem my own self-esteem. In my junior year, thanks to my outstanding grades, I earned the appreciation of a professor. After I started working on a research project with the professor, I received a 900 yuan stipend every month. This amount wasn't much, but to me it was extra income. It could help my repayment plan progress a little faster. Besides that, I also used my free time to take on freelance video editing jobs online. The work was exhausting. I often had to stay up late into the night. Sometimes I even had to pull all-nighters. But every time I saw the number in my repayment account, increasing bit by bit, I felt a little more at ease. Every month, my repayment account would grow by 1 or 2,000 yuan. It wasn't much, but many a little makes a mickle. One day, it'd gather enough for that 100,000 yuan. Su Qingyan's life seemed to never change. He was always the center of attention, drawing everyone's gaze wherever he went. He still wore beautiful clothes, drove an unrecognizable brand of car to school, and was always surrounded by a crowd of friends. The laughter and chatter never ceased. It seemed he had never known what sorrow was. We still had no interaction whatsoever. Just occasionally crossing paths on the street, his gaze would sweep over me, pausing for no more than a second. That look was so indifferent. As if looking at a familiar stranger, I calmly accepted this distance. We were never from the same world to begin with. Like day and night, we would never intersect. That 100,000 yuan was just an accident, and also a transaction. He used money to buy a victory in a high-stakes bet, and I used my self-esteem. Used the next 4 years of my youth to exchange for a chance to change my destiny. Right now, this transaction was still ongoing. I was working hard to become a worthy partner in this transaction. In the blink of an eye, it was senior year. Classes gradually became fewer. Everyone started getting busy planning their own futures. Some were taking grad school exams, some civil service exams, some were job hunting. The dorm hallways were filled with interview calls every day. Occasionally, you could hear cries of overwhelming pressure. I was also very busy. On one hand, I had to finish my graduation project. On the other, I had to prepare resumes and interviews for several top tech companies. My 4-year plan was coming to an end. Every expense in my notebook was recorded incredibly clearly. That 100,000 yuan. I had squeezed almost every drop of value out of it. I used it to equip my mind, used it to maintain my most basic dignity, used it to help my family through hard times. I heard Lin Yu say that Su Qingyan was going abroad soon. His family had already arranged everything for him, going to Harvard abroad for advanced studies. After graduating, head straight to Wall Street. The absolute picture of a winner in life. I nodded, not feeling anything particularly special inside. This was the life trajectory he was meant to have anyway. An elite background, outstanding talent. He was always meant to have such a brilliantly shining future. One ordinary afternoon, I walked out of the library, preparing to head back to the dorm to revise my graduation project. As I passed by the school's artificial lake, a familiar figure caught my eye. It was Su Qingyan. He was sitting alone on a bench by the lake. No followers, no friends. The area around him was empty, completely different from his usual sought-after appearance. Like two entirely different people. He was wearing a simple white shirt, his face bare, his long hair cascading casually over his shoulders, staring blankly at the surface of the lake. The sunset cast its glow on him, draping him in a soft golden halo, which also softened his usual arrogant and aloof demeanor, adding a touch of gentleness, a touch of loneliness. I stopped in my tracks, standing under the shade of a tree not far away. I didn't dare approach, nor did I want to disturb him. I didn't know why he was here alone, away from the crowds, dazing off by himself. Maybe he ran into trouble applying to grad school. Maybe he had a fight with his friends. Countless thoughts flashed through my mind, but none of them were certain. He just sat there quietly, motionless. The breeze from the lake blew his long hair around. He didn't reach up to brush it away, just stared blankly out at the lake. As if he were the only person left in the whole world, he took a small music box out of his pocket. Its silver casing looked incredibly exquisite. He gently wound it up. A clear, melodious tune began to play, a gentle yet sorrowful rendition of Für Elise. It sounded especially distinct in the quiet space by the lake. He cradled the music box in the palm of his hand, looking down at it intently. With a focused expression. This was a Su Qingyan I had never seen before. In my impression, he was always someone who shone brilliantly, capable of anything. But now it seemed a crack had appeared in this perfect statue. I suddenly remembered my freshman year. After he transferred the money to me, the expression on his face when he looked up and told Zhao Kai, "If you bet, you have to accept the loss." On the surface, he was calm and cold. But deep in his eyes, there seemed to be something hidden. Something I couldn't understand at the time. What was it? I couldn't figure it out. And I didn't dare think about it any further. Between him and me, there was an uncrossable world separating us. His sorrows, his loneliness. None of it was something I could understand, let alone a place I could step into. I stood under the tree for a long time, until it got completely dark. The streetlights by the lake turned on, their soft light scattered across the surface of the lake. The ripples? Sparkling. Su Qingyan put the music box away, carefully placing it in his pocket. He stood up and slowly walked away, looking lonely and isolated. From beginning to end, he never noticed my presence. I returned to the dorm. For the first time in my life, I didn't open my notebook, nor did I review my repayment plan. I sat at my desk, dazing off for a long time. My mind was filled with the melody of that Für Elise. For the first time, I realized Su Qingyan probably wasn't as carefree.
He appeared on the outside.
In that glamorous, dazzling world, he probably had his own sorrows too, his own loneliness. That 100,000 yuan to her probably meant absolutely nothing. It was just pocket change she could toss out on a whim. But that a bet is a bet attitude. What did it actually mean to her? For the first time, I really started thinking about it. But no matter how hard I thought, I couldn't find an answer. Between her and me lay an invisible abyss. A gap in our family backgrounds. A gap in how we were raised. Something I could never cross, no matter how hard I tried. The only thing I could do was to pay back that 100,000 yuan as fast as possible, and then completely disappear from her world. I shook my head, pushing away the chaotic thoughts. I opened my laptop and started seriously polishing my resume. I knew the interview notices would be rolling in soon. I had to land the best possible offer. I had to clear my debt quickly. That was the only thing I should be focusing on right now. Graduation day was fast approaching. The whole campus was steeped in the bittersweet air of parting. Classmates were busy taking graduation photos, busy saying their goodbyes, busy planning their futures. And I was busy too, going from one interview to the next, not daring to slack off for even a second. Hard work pays off. I finally received an offer from a major corporation, a top-tier domestic tech company. The salary and benefits far exceeded my expectations. It was enough to wipe out my debt in no time, and enough to give my family a better life. The day I signed the contract, I walked out of the company building, stood in the sunlight, and let out a long, deep breath. The massive weight on my chest was finally lifted. 4 years of endurance and hard work had finally paid off. I had finally escaped my days of poverty. I finally had the power to save myself. That night, I returned to my dorm. I opened my 4-year planner, flipped to the very last page. There lay my financial summary. Income, 100,000 yuan. Tuition, 16,500 yuan. Books and materials, 5,800 yuan. Sent home, 10,000 yuan. Food, 1,200 yuan. Living expenses, 40,800 yuan. Total expenses, 74,300 yuan. These were just the core expenses. There were plenty of other miscellaneous costs. I had recorded them all in another small notebook.
4 years.
100,000 yuan. I had spent almost every last penny, but every single cent was spent exactly where it needed to be. I checked my bank account balance. The original 100,092.37 yuan was now down to just 3.80 yuan. No more, no less. Just enough to last me until graduation. I closed the notebook, gently running my fingers over the cover. This notebook, which held 4 years of my youth, had finally fulfilled its purpose. Now I had a job with a stable income, a clear ability to pay off my debts. The rest was just a matter of time. I believed that as long as I kept at it, in just a few years, I could pay off everything I owed and face myself with a clear conscience, and face Su Qingyan. The day of the graduation ceremony, the sky was clear and blue. The sun was shining brightly. The entire campus was filled with laughter and chatter. Everyone was in their graduation gowns, frantically taking photos all over the school, hugging each other goodbye. The air was brimming with the energy of youth and the reluctance of parting ways. I felt like an outsider, standing quietly on the fringes of the crowd, watching the bustling scene unfold before me. without a single ripple of emotion in my heart. I didn't have many friends. The only guy I was somewhat close to was Lin Yu. He had signed on to work at a government agency back in his hometown. He was catching a train to leave this afternoon. We said a simple goodbye, didn't have much of a heart-to-heart, but we silently wished each other well, all morning long. My eyes kept scanning the crowd for Su Qingyan's silhouette. I wanted to thank her in person today. Thank her for that 100,000 yuan back then, and tell her that I'd be paying it back soon. I didn't want to owe her anything, but I searched and searched, and she was nowhere to be found. Maybe she didn't even show up. For someone like her, a graduation ceremony probably didn't mean much. Her future was already set in stone. There was no need for her to leave any memories here. I couldn't tell if what I felt was disappointment or relief. Disappointment, because I didn't get to thank her face to face. Relief, because I didn't have to stand in front of her and expose my poverty and inferiority all over again. Didn't have to face the pity that might flash in her eyes. Just as I was about to turn and leave, to bid a final farewell to the school that had carried my youth for the past 4 years, a familiar voice rang out from behind me. Chen Yan. I froze and turned around. It was Su Qingyan. She was wearing a graduation gown too. Her long hair cascaded over her shoulders. With light makeup, she was as radiant and striking as ever, just like she always was, but with a touch more gentleness. She stood quietly by herself, not far away, looking at me with a faint smile playing on her lips. Congratulations on getting the offer.
Yeah, I got it.
I felt a bit awkward, not knowing what else to say. I could only give a simple reply. It's pretty good. She nodded. We fell into a silence. People were bustling all around us. It was loud and chaotic, yet the two of us stood there, like an isolated movie frame.
Soundless.
Out of place amidst the hustle and bustle, I parted my lips, wanting to bring up the money, but the words died in my throat. I swallowed them back down. In front of someone about to study abroad at a world-renowned university, with such a bright future ahead of her, would my little repayment plan just sound ridiculous? Just as I was hesitating, she spoke up first. Her tone was calm, but it carried an undeniable sense of distance. "I'm leaving soon." She glanced at me. Her gaze was deep, as if holding back 1,000 words. But in the end, she said nothing else.
That money.
"You don't need to pay it back." I froze, my whole body going stiff. I couldn't believe my ears.
What did you say?
"You don't need to pay it back."
Yeah, no need to pay it back.
She nodded. Her tone remained calm. "That was money I lost on a bet. It has nothing to do with you. It doesn't count as you owing me."
But
I wanted to say more. Wanted to tell her that that money wasn't just a bet to me. It was the price of my dignity. It was my hope for the past 4 years. I absolutely had to pay her back. She cut me off again. A faint smile tugged at the corners of her lips.
you've already earned everything you wanted on your own.
Haven't you? You don't need to use that money to prove anything. And you don't need to feel like you owe me anymore. With that, she didn't give me a chance to speak. She turned and walked away, her long hair fluttering gently in the wind, her back as proud and distant as ever, just like the first time I saw her in that karaoke room, but with a bit more resolve. I stood rooted to the spot. For a long time, I didn't move, my hands tightly gripping my diploma and degree. They felt heavy, as if I were holding on to my 4 years of youth, holding on to all my perseverance and hard work. She said I didn't need to pay it back. She said I had already won. But inside, I felt even more bitter, as if I had just lost something incredibly important. Our transaction had been unilaterally terminated by her. I didn't even get a chance to repay my debt, didn't get a chance to redeem my dignity. For myself, I used to think that the chain around my neck was a shackle I wanted to break with all my might. But when she casually waved her hand and severed that chain, I felt an unprecedented sense of helplessness and loss. The 4 years were over. The story between Su Qingyan and me seemed to be over too. I thought this was the end, that we would move on to our separate lives and never cross paths again. She would shine brightly overseas. I would grind and strive back home, pay off the debt in my heart, and wed both be at peace. That's what I used to think. On my first day of work, my boss showed me around the company with its massive floor-to-ceiling windows. Outside were rows of towering skyscrapers, bustling traffic, a noisy, prosperous metropolis. Everyone in the office walked with a hurried pace, their faces showing that elite mix of exhaustion and excitement. The air smelled faintly of caffeine and money. It smelled exactly like it did 4 years ago. Yet it was completely different. Money back then was extravagance, a game, a symbol of face. But money here was a goal. It was fuel, the foundation I needed to pay off the debt in my heart. I quickly adapted to life here. Or rather, I perfectly carried over my lifestyle from my 4 years of college. Disciplined, efficient, and goal-oriented, not daring to slack off for a second. Others clocked in at 9 a.m. I was there by 8 a.m., finishing my daily work plan bright and early. Others clocked out at 6 p.m. I worked overtime late into the night, pushing myself to improve, taking on more and more tasks. My colleagues called me the king of the grind. At first, it was just a joke. Later, it turned into awe. I didn't care what anyone else said. I only knew I had to work hard, had to make a lot of money, had to scrape together that 100,000 yuan as soon as possible. Even if she didn't want it, I still had to save it up. This was a promise to myself, the closure I needed for my pathetic youth. Everyone in this office building was rushing to chase after something. Some were secretly scheming for a promotion. Some were calculating every penny of their year-end bonus. Some were losing sleep over stocks and options. But me, from start to finish, I only had one number in my eyes. Pure determination. I purposely opened a brand new bank account, not linked to any payment apps. The moment my monthly salary hit,
ID deduct rent.
food and other basic expenses, and every single remaining cent was transferred into this card without hesitation. Watching the number in the account slowly, but steadily grow, the heart that had been left hanging by that debt could finally find a moment of peace. Compared to the destitution of living on 8 yuan a month during college, I didn't need to torture myself like that anymore. But frugality had seeped into my bones. It had become instinct. I never bought unnecessary clothes. My closet only held a few simple, durable work outfits. I never went to pointless social gatherings. My only hobby in my free time was hitting the gym downstairs at the office, sweating out the exhaustion of working overtime. My life was as monotonous as a pendulum. Work, then home, without a single ripple. A year passed, thanks to my extreme dedication and hard work. I quickly went from a regular employee to a core team member. My salary doubled. 2 years later, I volunteered to take over a major project that was on the verge of stalling. After countless sleepless nights, overcoming hurdle after hurdle, I finally pulled it off flawlessly and bagged a 6-figure year-end bonus. After 3 years, I was smoothly promoted to project manager, leading a small team of 5. Becoming one of the youngest managers in the company. By now, the repayment account had far exceeded 100,000 yuan. I specifically looked up the highest bank interest rates over the past 8 years, carefully calculated every cent of interest, and rounded it up to an even 130,000 yuan. I figured this was the most respectful way I could repay her. The money was all ready, but she had completely vanished without a trace. After graduation, Su Qingyan seemed to have evaporated from the face of the earth, leaving behind no contact info whatsoever and no news about her at all. I scoured every social media platform,
Even foreign networks.
but I couldn't find a single active account under the name Su Qingyan that matched her. It was as if she had never existed in this world. I called Lin Yu, the only friend from college I still kept in touch with, but he just shook his head and said he had no idea. She went to study in the US back then. She's not in our circle. How would we even contact her? After graduation, Lin Yu went back to his hometown, got a job at a government agency, lived a quiet, peaceful life, and got engaged not long after. We still kept in touch occasionally, just chatting about everyday stuff. The name Su Qingyan became an unspoken taboo between us. Neither of us ever brought it up. That 130,000 yuan just sat quietly in the bank account, like a cold brand, marking my poverty and inferiority from back then, and an unfulfilled promise. 4 years after graduation, I put a down payment on an apartment downtown. It wasn't big, but it had a great view. Standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could take in the night view of almost half the city. I also bought a car to get around. Nothing too expensive, but it was enough for me, in this massive city, to have a safe haven I could freely escape to. I had finally become the kind of person I used to look up to, living a decent life, but the void in my heart left by Su Qingyan could never be filled. Late at night, I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the thousands of lights in the city. I had a stable career, my own house, my own car. By normal standards, I was definitely a success. But whenever the night grew quiet and I shed all my exhaustion, I still couldn't help but think of Su Qingyan. Was she doing well in the US? That girl, who was once as proud as a princess in a foreign land. Did she find someone who truly understood her? Did she still play truth or dare on a whim, like she did in that karaoke room back then?
Was she still so carefree?
Casually changing the fate of a poor guy like that. These questions had no answers. I only knew that if I couldn't find her, this debt in my heart would follow me for the rest of my life, becoming a lingering obsession that would never fade. One Friday night, the college class WeChat group that had been dead for 4 years suddenly blew up. The class rep posted an announcement. Next weekend, there would be a 4-year graduation reunion. The venue is set at a 5-star hotel buffet, inviting everyone who could make it to gather and reminisce about our youth. The group chat instantly exploded. Some sighed about how fast time flew. Some cheered about wanting to see old friends, unable to hold back from showing off their current achievements. I watched the messages rapidly scrolling across my screen, feeling absolutely nothing. These so-called class reunions were nothing more than a stage for people to show off and compare their lives. I didn't want to waste my precious time on people and things that didn't matter. Just as I was about to close WeChat, a private message from Lin Yu popped up. "Hey, are you going to the reunion?" I replied bluntly with 2 words.
Not going.
Lin Yu quickly fired back.
Come on, man. Go.
We haven't seen each other in 4 years. Why refuse? Besides, Zhao Kai is coming this time too.
That guy is riding high right now.
Started his own tech company. Heard Hez making a killing. The name Zhao Kai was like a sharp needle, instantly piercing my nerves.
Back then at the KTV,
He was the one who used that arrogant, vicious tone to propose that 100,000 yuan bet. He was the one who trampled my pride underfoot, turning me into a clown for everyone to gawk at. I refused again.
I'm not going.
I have to work overtime this weekend. Lin Yu still wouldn't give up.
Stop bullshitting.
You're a manager now? Do you really still need to work overtime every day? I flew all the way here from our hometown just to see you once. If you don't show up, you're really not giving me any face. Looking at the message on the screen, remembering the care she showed me back in college, I finally couldn't refuse anymore. On the day of the reunion, I drove to the hotel. The parking lot was packed with supercars, each one flaunting the wealth and status of its owner. I quietly parked my everyday commuter car in a hidden corner. In that moment, it felt like I was back 4 years ago. A poor college student in a faded, washed-out jacket, nervously stepping into the glitz and glamour of that KTV back then, only this time. I was wearing a sharp suit and had enough money in my pocket to pay for this expensive dinner and enough to uphold my own dignity. Inside the VIP room, everyone was already seated. 4 years hadn't seen each other. Many people had completely changed. Some had gained weight. Some had shed their youthful naivety, gaining a bit of worldly shrewdness. And some still kept their flashy demeanor, faces full of smugness. As soon as they saw me walk in, several people enthusiastically stood up to greet me, their tones dripping with flattery.
Oh, look at the big boss now, Manager Chen.
A pleasure? A pleasure.
You gotta look out for us from now on, man. The people who used to ignore me back then, or even secretly mocked me, were now wearing eager, welcoming smiles. This shift in attitude was simply because of my current status and position. I politely replied to each of them, then found a seat in the corner, trying to keep a low profile. Zhao Kai was indeed there, wearing a designer suit, gold-rimmed glasses, and slicked back hair. He really looked the part of a decent human being. He was surrounded by a crowd, looking incredibly smug. When he saw me, he took the initiative to walk over with a wine glass, a fake smile plastered on his face. Chen Yan, long time no see. Heard you're moving up in the world at a big company. Already made manager. That's pretty impressive.
You flatter me.
I nodded coldly, not saying another word. He paused for a moment, deliberately dragging out his words, his tone full of implication. Out of our whole class, you're probably the most successful one now. Back then, there was also Su Qingyan. He intentionally brought up Su Qingyan's name, then deliberately cut himself off. A hint of mockery flashed in his eyes, as if he was hiding some juicy secret. I looked at him, my expression unchanged, but a sense of unease welled up inside me. As the drinks flowed, everyone's conversations gradually opened up. Some talked about funny college memories, others complained about their current work pressure. Right then, someone casually mentioned Su Qingyan. Speaking of which, how is our class beauty Su Qingyan doing these days? She went to the US back then. She must be a Wall Street elite by now, right? As soon as those words fell, the room suddenly went quiet for a moment. Everyone looked at each other, their expressions a bit strange. No one said a word. An eerie silence enveloping the atmosphere. Zhao Kai took a sip of wine, set his glass down, and sneered, his tone full of sarcasm. Wall Street elite? Are you guys dreaming? Someone couldn't hold back and pressed Zhao Kai. What do you mean by that? Did something happen to Qingyan? What could possibly happen? Her family went bankrupt a long time ago. Zhao Kai said disdainfully, if talking about some trivial matter not worth caring about.
You guys didn't know.
Of course it's true.
Probably about 2 years ago, her dad's investments failed. He got scammed. The company's capital chain completely snapped, and debts piled up. I heard it reached hundreds of millions of yuan. The VIP room immediately erupted in gasps of shock. Everyone looked stunned. Someone hurriedly asked, "Then what about Su Qingyan? Where are her parents?" Her parents were real sly. They swept up whatever money was left that very night and fled abroad. They're still wanted fugitives. Zhao Kai curled his lip, his tone full of contempt. It's a real pity for our Princess Qingyan, left behind all alone to shoulder all that debt. Not long ago, I even heard, the court auctioned off every single asset under her name. Houses, cars, she has absolutely nothing left. So now she's a blacklisted defaulter. Basically, a deadbeat. Zhao Kai sneered. She can't even take the high-speed rail or fly on a plane, let alone stay in a 5-star hotel. How the mighty have fallen! She was so glorious back then, and now she's got nothing, right? The room sank into a dead silence once again. Everyone was rendered speechless by the news. I felt the blood in my veins instantly run cold, my ears ringing, unable to hear anything else. Whatever Zhao Kai said after that, I didn't catch a single word. Only one thought echoed in my mind. Su Qingyan is bankrupt. That girl who once shined as bright as the sun, who used to wear beautiful dresses, drive luxury cars, and could easily pull out 100,000 yuan to pull me out of the mud back then, had actually fallen from grace. sinking into a quagmire with no way out. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor, letting out a harsh, grating sound that shattered the silence in the VIP room. Everyone's eyes darted toward me. I didn't say a word. With an icy expression, I turned and walked out. The whispers and gossip behind me, and the gasps of surprise were all left in my wake. I stepped out of the hotel. The cold wind outside slapped my face, chilling me to the bone. Yet I didn't feel the cold at all. I got into my car, my hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. But I had no idea where to go. I only had one single thought in my head, incredibly resolute: find her. I have to find her. For the first time in 4 years, I mobilized every resource I had, doing whatever it took to find one person. I hired a private investigator, asking him to track down Su Qingyan's whereabouts. I contacted colleagues in my company's legal department, asking them to check public legal records, to find all cases related to Su Qingyan. As the days went by, fragmented pieces of information gradually made their way to me. Everything Zhao Kai said was true, and the reality was even more tragic than he described. Her situation was 100 times worse than I had imagined. After Su Qingyan's father's company went bankrupt, one of the guarantors, she was ruled by the court to bear joint liability. All the properties under her name, cars and bank deposits, were frozen and auctioned off to pay the debts. But compared to hundreds of millions in debt, that money was just a drop in the bucket. She was officially placed on the blacklist of dishonest judgment debtors, an invisible net trapping her at the very bottom of this city's society. Banned from planes and high-speed trains, banned from staying in luxury hotels, banned from high-end consumption. Even finding a decent job became a luxury. The last piece of information the PI gave me was, half a year ago, Su Qingyan rented a basement in a dilapidated apartment complex in the suburbs. Dark, damp, and devoid of sunlight. Later, because she couldn't afford the rent, she was kicked out by the landlord and completely vanished without a trace after that. All leads went cold there. I parked my car in front of that old apartment complex, staring at the dark, damp basement entrance, reeking of mildew, and stood there for a very, very long time. I couldn't fathom how she had endured these 2 grueling years all alone, how she had struggled to survive in such despair. Over the following months, I was like a ghost, wandering through every corner of the city. After work, I didn't go home, but drove to places where the homeless usually gathered. Under bridges, parks, subway entrances, 24-hour fast food joints. Every time I saw a slender woman's silhouette, my heart would clench and I did rush over, but it was never her. I started to doubt, would I never find her again? Maybe she had already left this city full of
humiliation.
Maybe she had been crushed by life and was no longer in this world. The moment this thought arose, it wrapped around me like vines, making me shudder in fear. It was a winter night, the cold wind howling, the temperature dropping to a terrifying low. I had just finished a stint of
Week-long overtime at the company.
physically and mentally exhausted. It was already 1 a.m., and I was driving down a deserted road. As I passed by an overpass, there was a multi-car pileup ahead, completely blocking the road. I had no choice but to turn off under the bridge, taking a detour underneath. Under the overpass, it had always been a gathering place for the homeless. They used cardboard boxes and tattered blankets to set up makeshift tents to escape the winter cold, making do for the night. I drove slowly, my headlights slowly sweeping over the huddled figures. Inside those shabby tents, my heart had already grown numb. The repeated disappointments had pushed me to the brink of giving up. Just as the headlights were about to sweep past the last tent, my movement suddenly froze. That tent was incredibly flimsy, consisting of just a single torn blanket. Someone was lying inside, covered in a filthy, ragged military coat, curled up into a tight ball, looking no different from the other homeless people. But sticking out from that filthy bedding was a foot, wearing a canvas shoe. Even though its original color was unrecognizable, caked in mud and grime, I recognized the style. It was the cheap kind of shoe from our old college district. The most common style. Su Qingyan had never worn cheap canvas shoes like that. Yet, my heart started pounding wildly for some inexplicable reason. An ominous premonition spreading from the bottom of my heart. I parked the car by the side of the road, turned off the engine, pushed the door open, and stepped out. The freezing wind cut into my face like a knife, making me shiver uncontrollably. Step by step, I slowly walked toward the makeshift tent. It was dead quiet all around, with only the howling wind and the frantic beating of my own heart. I walked up to the tent, slowly crouched down, and by the pale yellow light of a distant street lamp, I gradually made out that face. That face was filthy, covered in dust and grime. Her hair was a tangled mess like dry weeds, completely unkempt. Her eye sockets were deeply sunken, her chin terrifyingly sharp. Her lips were dry and cracked, devoid of any color. But those familiar features, even with her eyes tightly shut, still carried a hint of stubbornness. I absolutely couldn't be mistaken. It was her. It was really Su Qingyan. My breath hitched for a split second, feeling like a sledgehammer had slammed into my chest, hurting so much I could barely speak. She seemed to sense someone's presence, her body shifting slightly, Her eyelashes fluttered, struggling to open a tiny slit. Those eyes that used to be so clear and bright, that always looked at me with a mix of curiosity and distance, were now left with only endless exhaustion and emptiness. Unfocused, devoid of light. Yes, if covered by a thick layer of dust, stripped of all the pride and aloofness from years ago. She looked at me, her gaze dazed, seemingly unable to recognize who the person in front of her was. I looked at the bewilderment and despair in her eyes, my heart feeling like it was being squeezed by an invisible hand, aching so much I couldn't breathe. I slowly reached my hand out to her, opening my palm, my voice calm but firm, carrying an undeniable strength, just like 4 years ago, at graduation. The way she looked when she told me, "No need to pay me back. Come with me." Okay. Her pupils shrank sharply, her empty gaze instantly shaken, filled with shock and disbelief. She stared blankly at me, then looked down at my outstretched hand. The next second, from those bleak, lightless eyes, large teardrops welled up, silently rolling down her cheeks. Her tears were like a glacier that had built up for so long, finally melting completely in this moment. No agonizing wails, just silently falling, washing away the dirt on her face, leaving distinct tear tracks behind. I didn't rush her, nor did I speak, just quietly crouched there watching her. We stayed like that, one crouching, one lying there, amidst the biting wind under the city overpass. It felt as if the whole world had hit the pause button, leaving only the distant, occasional sound of tires scraping against the road, and the sound of her desperate tears, almost drowned out by the wind. A long while later, I stood up, took off my expensive wool coat, and bent down to gently drape it over her frail body. Her body trembled violently, as if she had just been burned by something, her tears falling even harder. She instinctively tried to push the coat away, wanting to reject this sudden warmth, but she was too weak. Her arm raised halfway, dropped limply back down. She didn't even have the strength to resist anymore. I didn't give her a chance to refuse. Bending down again and with resolute force, gently grasped her freezing arm. Her hand was so cold, smeared with dirt and covered in tiny cuts. Carefully, bit by bit, I helped her up from that pile of filthy bedding. She was so light as a feather. I practically had to half carry her, just to support her crumbling body. She stumbled, every step incredibly difficult, as if it drained every ounce of strength she had left. It was only a distance of a few dozen meters, but it took us a very, very long time to walk it. With every step, it was like overcoming all the trauma she had endured over the past 2 years. I opened the passenger door and carefully set her down in the seat. She curled up in the spacious seat, her body trembling slightly. Looking even smaller, the oversized wool coat wrapped around her made her look like a child wearing an adult's clothes by mistake. Looking so out of place, I closed the door, got into the driver's seat, and immediately cranked the car's heater to the max. As the warm air slowly spread, she started shivering uncontrollably again, her teeth chattering loudly.
A natural physical reaction.
When suddenly exposed to warmth after extreme, biting cold, I didn't ask where she wanted to go, nor did I ask what had happened over the past 2 years. I knew that those past events were unspeakable wounds to her. I just calmly started the car and slowly merged into the traffic. She didn't say a word, turning her face to watch the neon lights flashing by outside the window, the dazzling, luxurious lights that once belonged to her. And in her empty eyes, there wasn't even a ripple of emotion. She was like a puppet stripped of its soul. Toward the bustling world that once made her so proud and arrogant, she now had absolutely no interest. The car slowly pulled into my apartment complex and parked in the underground garage. I turned off the engine, got out, and walked around to the passenger side. Opening the door for her, she didn't move, maintaining that same posture, her lifeless gaze fixed out the window, as if her soul was still trapped under that freezing bridge. I didn't rush her, just waited patiently. After a long while, she slowly turned her head to look at me, her eyes full of confusion and uncertainty, along with a faint, barely noticeable resistance. I reached out my hand to her again. This time, she hesitated for a long time, her fingertips trembling slightly, before finally placing that freezing, dirt-stained, and bruised hand gently into my palm. I held her hand tightly, gently pulled her out of the car, and walked into the elevator. I opened the door with my fingerprint, and bright, warm light spilled out. My apartment wasn't big, but I kept it spotlessly clean, decorated in a minimalist Nordic style, with everything neatly in its place. Su Qingyan stood at the door, her footsteps halting, not daring to step inside. She looked down at the canvas shoes of an unrecognizable color on her feet, then at the spotless wooden floor, her eyes filled with an inferiority complex and timidity. I didn't point out her awkwardness, just took out from the shoe cabinet a brand new pair of fluffy slippers and gently placed them in front of her. Change into these or you'll catch a cold. She hesitated for a moment, then quietly followed me into the living room. I pointed toward the bathroom and said, "Go take a shower. There is always hot water. And there are clean towels and clothes in the cabinet. I don't have any women's clothes, so I could only find a cotton sweatsuit I've never worn. Just make do with this for now." She didn't say anything, just gave a slight nod, then turned and walked into the bathroom, Soon after, the sound of running water echoed from inside. I walked into the kitchen and opened the fridge. It was stocked with all sorts of imported ingredients: milk, steak, fresh vegetables, and fruits. All things I usually kept on hand, but right now, I had no idea what to make for her. Her stomach had been tormented by hunger and cold for so long. I was afraid it wouldn't be able to handle anything greasy. Finally, I scooped some rice from the bin, washed it thoroughly, put it in a clay pot, and turned the heat to low, slowly simmering a pot of plain white porridge. This was the best thing to warm her stomach, and the most suitable meal for her right now. The sound of water in the bathroom ran for a very, very long time, to the point where I started getting worried, wondering if something had happened to her in there. Just as I couldn't hold back anymore and was about to knock, the water stopped. Another 10 minutes passed, and the bathroom door gently opened. She stepped out, her soaking wet hair draped over her shoulders, water droplets dripping from the ends. She was wearing my oversized sweatsuit, the pant legs a bit too long, bunching up loosely around her ankles. Her whole body looked as if it had just been cleansed, finally revealing her true appearance. Her skin was very pale, but it was a sickly, bloodless kind of pale. That face, once so proud and radiant, now held only an unwashable exhaustion and brokenness. Completely stripped of its former glory, she didn't dare look at me, keeping her head bowed, her hands tightly gripping the hem of the sweatshirt, her body slightly stiff, like a child who had just done something wrong. I scooped the freshly simmered white porridge into a clean porcelain bowl, placed it on the dining table, and gently pushed it toward her.
Eat something.
To warm your stomach. She looked up, looked at the steaming bowl of white porridge, then looked up at me again, her eyes filled with complex emotions, gratitude, inferiority, and a hint of grievance that was hard to detect. The girl who once used 100,000 yuan, like a god, pulling me out of the mud. And now, he needed me to use a warm bowl of plain porridge to sustain his most basic will to live. The absurdity and cruelty of fate were fully laid bare in this moment. In the days that followed, a bizarre yet unspoken balance formed between us. I still went to work at the company every day, while he stayed at home, silent and withdrawn. He slept a lot. On the first day, he slept for almost 20 hours straight, as if trying to make up for all the peaceful sleep he had lost over the past 2 years. He still didn't talk much. There was barely any communication between us. Before leaving for work, I would make a simple breakfast and leave it on the dining table. After work, I'd buy a light dinner on my way back and set the table. I bought him a new phone, registered a new SIM card, and placed it on his nightstand. I also bought him a lot of new clothes. Not the expensive outfits he used to wear back then, but the simplest, most comfortable hoodies, t-shirts, and jeans. Neatly folding them into his closet one by one, he would quietly finish the food I prepared, change into the new clothes I bought, and keep himself clean and tidy. But he was always like a transparent ghost living in this apartment, so quiet that he practically didn't exist. He never initiated a conversation with me, nor did he ever step out of his room on his own. It was as if he was using this silence to cling to the last pitiful shreds of his pride. I understood how he felt. He didn't want to interact with me, didn't want to bring up the past, because the moment he spoke, it would mean admitting his own defeat, admitting how pathetic he had become. I knew he needed time to process everything, time to stand back up again, so I never pushed him. I just quietly stayed by his side, giving him enough space and respect. The change happened on the evening of the 4th day. I came home from work, pushed the door open, and was surprised to find that the dishes piled in the sink from that morning had been washed clean and neatly stacked on the drying rack. The apartment floor was also mopped spotless, even cleaner than when I usually did it myself. I walked into the living room and saw him sitting on the sofa. He wasn't hiding in his room anymore. He was wearing the light gray hoodie I bought him, his hair neatly combed. He sat there very quietly, watching the city sunset through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the fading sunlight cast over him, draping his slender silhouette in a soft, golden halo. Hearing me return, his shoulders gave a barely noticeable tremble. He hurriedly stood up, turned to look at me, his lips parting. If he wanted to say something, his eyes were filled with confusion and unease. But in the end, he didn't say a word. He just lowered his head, slowly turned around, and started heading back to his room. I instinctively called out to stop him. My tone was calm, yet it carried an undeniable authority.
Wait.
His footsteps came to a sudden halt. With his back to me, his shoulders tensed up, stiff as a statue. I lowered my voice and said gently, "You don't have to do any of this." Silence enveloped us, like an invisible net. After a long while, he slowly turned around. This was the first time since returning to this house that he actually looked me in the eye. A swirl of complex emotions surged in those eyes.
Ian, unconcealable gratitude.
A humiliation hard to hide, and something else I couldn't quite read. A stubbornness that almost felt like rejection. After a moment of silence, He finally spoke, his voice hoarse and dry. If his throat had been scrubbed raw with sandpaper. Every single word carried the weight of 1,000 pounds. I can't just stay here and do nothing. The words were spoken softly, but they felt like a red-hot iron nail, piercing right through my heart. It ached to the core, even after being pushed to the absolute brink. He was still calculating these things, still so stubborn. Desperately clinging to that unyielding pride of his, I looked at his pale, gaunt face, feeling a bitter mix of emotions. A blend of heartache and helplessness, along with an indescribable sense of admiration. I didn't argue. I just turned and walked into the study. I pulled out from the deepest drawer of the bookcase an ordinary notebook, its cover yellowed and worn out. It was the notebook I used back in college, kept safe for 8 long years. I took the notebook back out to the living room, walked right up to him, and placed it in his hands. Looking thoroughly confused, he glanced down, his eyes landing on the 4 words written on the first page. His pupils shrank sharply, his body instantly freezing up, and even his breathing seemed to stop. Those 4 words were 4-year plan. Right below that, on the page, were detailed records of every single expense from that 100,000 yuan back then. Every item was clearly documented, complete with dates and what the money was used for. I pointed at the living expenses column and said to him gently, "The 100,000 yuan you gave me that year supported me through all 4 years of college. My rent and living expenses are all right here. Now, it's my turn." But before I could even finish, he was already staring blankly at the numbers in handwriting, crammed into the notebook, his eyes filled with absolute shock and disbelief. To him, it was nothing more than a spontaneous bet back then. But to me, it was the only ray of light in my dark youth. It was what I spent 4 whole years, with almost religious devotion, carefully executing as my survival contract. His fingers began to tremble uncontrollably. He slowly raised his hand, wanting to touch those familiar words, but stopped right before his fingers grazed the paper. As if it were some fragile treasure, he suddenly buried his face in his hands, his body slowly sinking to the floor, his shoulders shaking violently. The tears he had held back for far too long finally leaked through his fingers. It wasn't just silent weeping anymore, nor was it quiet sobbing. It was a heart-wrenching wail, a cry that tore at the soul, as if he wanted to pour out every ounce of suffering he had endured over the past 2 years. I didn't step forward, nor did I offer any words of comfort. I knew that right now he didn't need cheap sympathy or empty consolations. He just needed an outlet to completely break down, to let it all out. I just stood quietly to the side and placed a box of tissues right where he could reach it, like a silent guardian, letting all those long suppressed emotions slowly wash away. He cried for a very, very long time. Cried until his voice was too hoarse to speak. Cried until his body trembled from sheer exhaustion. Only after a long while did he gradually stop. He remained crouched on the floor like a lost child, his shoulders still heaving with occasional hiccups. I poured a glass of warm water and gently handed it to him. He looked up, took the glass, and took small sips. His emotions finally began to settle down a bit. "Get up, the floor is cold." I held out my hand. He hesitated for a moment, but still took my hand. Relying on my strength, he stumbled to his feet and sat down on the sofa. I placed the notebook on the coffee table in front of him. The living room sank into a prolonged silence once again. A long time later, he spoke in a hoarse voice, filled with deep remorse.
Sorry.
I looked at him in slight surprise. He avoided my gaze, his voice dropping even lower. "About what happened back then?"
Sorry.
"I didn't know. I had no idea that money was so important to you." "You don't need to apologize," I interrupted him. Meeting his sincerity with unwavering resolve, I said, "I'm the one who should be thanking you. If it weren't for that money, I wouldn't be who I am today." I was telling the truth. That 100,000 yuan was never just a sum of money. It was a beacon of light in the darkest moment of my life, the only lifeline I could cling to. While I was thrashing around in the mud, he lifted his head, looking at me with red, teary eyes. His lips trembled. Finally, he asked the question buried deep in his heart.
Why?
Why are you treating me so well?
"Why are you being so good to me?" I didn't answer directly. Instead, I pulled my phone from my pocket, unlocked it, and opened my banking app. I pulled up the repayment account I had kept for the past 8 years and handed it to him. He took the phone, looking puzzled. When he clearly saw the number on the screen, his entire body froze again. His eyes were full of disbelief. The account balance showed 146,000 yuan, the 100,000 principal, plus the interest over the past 8 years, calculated at the highest savings rate. I had prepared this money a long time ago. I just couldn't find him. Su Qingyan stared blankly at the string of numbers on the screen. His fingertips trembled slightly. He knew very well that this 140,000 yuan, compared to the hundreds of millions in debt his family shouldered back then, was nothing but a drop in the bucket. But he understood even more clearly that the meaning behind this money had long surpassed its material value. He finally understood why I had searched for him at all costs.
Why I brought him home.
Why I took such meticulous care of him. This wasn't sympathy. It wasn't pity. And it certainly wasn't some condescending charity. This was repaying a debt, a solemn settlement that had been delayed for 4 years. He handed the phone back to me and covered his face with his hands again. This time, he didn't cry. His body just kept trembling, his shoulders tense, as if he was suppressing something deep inside. I looked at him. The emptiness in my heart for the past 8 years was in this very moment finally filled by something heavy, yet incredibly comforting. I walked over and sat down next to him. This time, I didn't keep my distance. Instead, I reached out and gently placed my hand on his trembling shoulder. I softly called his name, Qingyan. It's all over now. He slowly lowered his hands and looked up at me, his face covered in tears. Under the bright lights, his eyes were no longer empty and lifeless. It was as if little stars were sparkling within them. He looked at me. He looked for a long, long time. Then, the corners of his mouth slowly curled up into a small smile. It was an incredibly fragile smile, but it was absolutely precious. Like after a long, harsh winter, the first blade of green grass sprouting from the frozen earth, bringing with it vitality and resilience. I knew that between him and me, the promise that had lasted for 8 years about money and pride, this very moment had finally come to a true end, and a completely new story had just begun. After getting his ID card sorted, we headed out again, going to the bank to open an account. This process was much harder than I thought. When the bank teller entered his name into the system, a warning prompt immediately popped up on the screen, blazing red. Subject to enforcement. The teller's expression changed instantly. The way she looked at us gained a hint of wariness and disdain.
Sorry, sir.
The teller's tone carried a touch of distance. According to regulations, we cannot open a new debit card for you. All bank accounts under your name have already been frozen. Su Qingyan's face instantly turned pale. His body trembled violently. He stood there, like a criminal being sentenced in public, enduring the invisible, judgmental stares of the people around us. He lowered his head even further. His shoulders were tense. I could feel his despair. The kind of despair when hope had just been kindled, only to be crushed to pieces by reality. I took a step forward, quietly shielding him, blocking out those unfriendly gazes. I nodded at the bank teller and spoke. I grabbed his hand and strode out of the bank. The sunlight outside was blinding, but it couldn't warm the gloom in his heart. It's useless, Chen Yan. He stopped walking, hugged his knees, and slowly crouched down, burying his face deep in his elbows. His voice choked with sobs. I'm just a debtor. I don't even have the right to own a bank card. I won't be able to find a job anymore. No company would hire an employee who can't even get a payroll card. There is no place for me in this society anymore. I took a step closer, gently holding his trembling shoulders. Without offering any empty words of comfort, I just took out my phone and called Zhou Yang, my senior from college. He was now a partner at a top-tier law firm, specializing in debt disputes.
Hello, Zhou.
It's Chen Yan. I have a question regarding someone subject to enforcement that I'd like to consult you about. To get a name removed from the blacklist, what procedures need to be done? I deliberately kept my voice steady and clear, making sure Su Qingyan, who was sitting on the ground, could hear every word. His shoulders stiffened, and he stopped trembling, then gradually calmed down. He slowly lifted his head and looked straight at me. I didn't look back at him, just focused on listening to the instructions from the other end of the line, nodding occasionally in response, and sometimes adding a few details. His debt is a joint guarantee liability after the company went bankrupt. The person involved didn't hide any assets, but instead fully cooperated with the court's investigation. Pausing for a moment, I emphasized my tone and asked, so, as long as a settlement agreement is reached with the main creditor, and a portion of the debt obligation is fulfilled, we can apply to the court to have his name removed from the blacklist.
Right. Yes. Thank you.
Sorry for the trouble. I'll treat you to a meal sometime. Hanging up, I crouched down to be at eye level with him, my tone firm yet gentle. You heard all of that. Things aren't as bad as you think. This isn't a dead end. We just need to go through a few more procedures. I'll hire the best legal team and contact every single creditor with you to negotiate a repayment plan. That debt, pay it off together. You will never be alone. His tears welled up again, rolling down his pale cheeks. But this time, his tears didn't just hold despair, but also a faint glimmer of hope that had been reignited. Restructuring the debts, contacting the creditors, a series of complex and tedious legal procedures officially began. I utilized all the connections and resources I had accumulated over the years. Zhou Yang introduced me to a team specializing in corporate debt restructuring that was both professional and highly efficient. Su Qingyan took everything he knew and explained it in detail to the lawyers. The mess his father had left behind was far more complicated than I had imagined, involving a slew of banks and dozens of individual creditors. The total debt was an astronomical figure, but just as the lawyer said, as long as the person is still here, As long as there's a will to solve the problem, there is always a chance to turn things around. The legal team took the initiative to contact a few of the core creditor banks to discuss the possibility of restructuring and settlement. This was a long and arduous process, not something that could be resolved overnight, but at least we had taken the first step toward change, knowing that professionals were handling the debt disputes. The heavy burden in Su Qingyan's heart was finally lifted by more than half. His spirits visibly improved. He no longer huddled in the living room all day. Whenever I came home from work, I would often see him sitting on the sofa, watching online courses on his tablet. The content was mostly about economic management and spatial design, which was his college major, and also the field he was once best at and loved the most. He was like a sponge that had been dry for too long, greedily absorbing knowledge, striving to catch up on the days wasted by suffering. His eyes gradually lost their dullness, replaced by a radiant focus. One evening, while I was handling some work in the study, the door was gently pushed open. Su Qingyan walked in carrying a glass of warm milk, his voice soft, still busy. He placed the milk on the corner of the desk next to my hand, his gaze falling on the layout of the study, his brows furrowing slightly. The way you've set up this room. It's too suffocating. In his tone, there was a subtle hint of disdain. It was the tone that belonged to the proud, radiant Su Qingyan of the past. Other than professional books, it's all cold decorations. And this globe is so outdated. There is no artistic sense to it at all. I stopped typing on the keyboard, looked up at him, and a faint smile curled on my lips. So, according to the brilliant ideas of Princess Su, how should it be arranged? His eyes lit up. If he had found his long-lost home turf. He gestured in the air, his tone becoming decisive. The wall color in the study is too dark. It should be repainted light gray, or use textured wallpaper to neutralize these rigid straight lines. The sofa has stiff, square corners. You need curved elements to balance it out. Replace that blocky coffee table. Choose a round one, and add some accent lighting. Put a floor lamp in the corner, and a table lamp next to the sofa. It'll make the space softer and warmer. He talked on and on, his eyes flashing with confident brilliance. At that moment, he was no longer a desperate failure,
In need of saving.
but had returned to being the Su Qingyan who pursued beauty to the extreme. A radiant, shining Su Qingyan. Sounds like you really know your stuff, I chimed in. Of course, he said proudly, before his voice dropped a little. I studied art history in college, and my dad used to collect a lot of paintings. When mentioning his father, his voice lowered, but the light in his eyes didn't fade. I looked at him and gently suggested, then how about I leave the redecorating of this house entirely up to you? He froze, his face showing clear disbelief. I picked up a pen, wrote a line on a sticky note, and pushed it toward him. Officially hiring you as my home aesthetics consultant. You decide the budget? Here is the deposit. On the sticky note, it read, Aesthetics consultant deposit. 1 bowl of red bean porridge. He looked at those words, stunned for a few seconds. Then, as if remembering something, he couldn't help but burst out laughing. It was the first time since returning to this house that he had laughed so happily. His clear laughter was like wind chimes, shattering the long-standing silence in the apartment. Is my taste only worth a bowl of red bean porridge? He looked up at me, his eyes brimming with amusement. It has to be at least a week of red bean porridge. Deal. I smiled back. Outside the window, the city lights were as dazzling as the Milky Way. I knew that the real Su Qingyan was coming back bit by bit, and my story with him had finally turned to a new page. No longer about debts and repayment, but about companionship and growing together. Su Qingyan treated this aesthetics consultant job
Like an official contract.
and threw himself into it wholeheartedly the very next day. When I went to work, he stopped watching online courses and instead took over the computer in the study, browsing all sorts of interior design websites, artists' personal pages, and online art exhibitions. Like a professional curator, he even downloaded specialized drafting software, tinkering with it bit by bit, drawing up a decorative perspective for my apartment. This was a completely new field for him, but he learned incredibly fast. His innate aesthetic sense, combined with his accumulated knowledge, gave him unique perspectives on spatial coordination. When I came home at night, he would always hold his tablet and report his progress with a serious face. His tone was quite professional and meticulous. For the main wall in the living room, I suggest using ash gray textured wallpaper. It gives more depth than just painting it. Your bookshelf is too monotonous. I've picked out a few minimalist decorations, which will serve as focal points for the space, without making it look cluttered. And we can put a few potted plants on the balcony to add some life to it. I rarely interrupted, just listening quietly, watching the sparkling light in his eyes, watching his serious, focused expression, and suddenly felt that a Su Qingyan like this was even more captivating than he was back in school. Whatever you say goes. I smiled and nodded. When are we going shopping? He froze, seemingly not expecting me to accept his entire plan without question. Hesitating for a moment, he threw out a rather modest number. The budget is only this much. I've looked it up. We don't need to buy luxury brands. High-quality designs at reasonable prices can also create a really great effect. That's too little. I shook my head. You're the consultant. You decide the budget. There is no need to save money for me. He pursed his lips, his gaze firm. It's not about saving money. It's just unnecessary. I know a vintage aesthetics shop that opens on weekends. A lot of independent designers sell their work there. The quality is good. The prices are reasonable, and we might find some interesting pieces. Seeing the anticipation in his eyes, I nodded immediately. All right, we'll go this weekend. On Saturday morning, I drove Su Qingyan to the vintage aesthetics shop located in the suburbs, near the city. The shop was inside an abandoned old factory, decorated in an industrial style, combined with all sorts of unique design pieces. Everywhere you looked, there were young faces, brimming with life and artistic flair. Su Qingyan was like a fish in water, pulling me through the stalls, his eyes shining brightly, having his own unique take on every piece. Look at this cement candlestick. The shape is so unique, and it's only a little over 20 yuan. And this hand-woven wall hanging. The color scheme is so bold. It'll definitely look great on the living room wall. This abstract painting has very strong colors. It has a hint of Monet, but the brushstrokes are much freer. He walked over to a stall filled with paintings and picked up a cool-toned abstract painting, his eyes full of longing. He turned to look at me, asking tentatively, "Chen Yan, how about this one?" I nodded, watching him carefully haggle with the stall owner, his eyes brimming with excitement. It was the first time I had seen him show such a lively expression. Stripped of his pride and wiped clean of his despair, he looked just like a kid receiving a surprise gift. Throughout the entire afternoon, we bought a lot of things: candlesticks, wall hangings, decorations, and even that abstract painting he fell in love with at first sight. None of them were expensive, but they all carried his aesthetic taste and thoughtfulness. I followed behind him, helping him carry the bags. Looking at his side profile, I suddenly felt that all my hard work and effort over the past 8 years were all for this very moment, so that he could smile again, so that I could be by his side and give him a safe haven. On the way back, Su Qingyan leaned against the passenger seat, hugging that painting in his arms. He is satisfied as a little cat that just caught a fish. After a long silence, he spoke softly. "Chen Yan, thank you." "Thank me for what?" I tilted my head and glanced at him. "Thank you for trusting my taste." His voice was very soft, but it held a deep sincerity. "And thank you for not seeing me as a burden." I smiled and didn't say anything, just gently pressing the gas pedal. The scenery outside the window sped by, just like our pasts that we didn't want to look back on, being left behind bit by bit. As soon as we got home, Su Qingyan couldn't wait any longer and started his renovation project. He stood on a chair, carefully hanging that abstract painting. On the wall in the study, the cool-toned painting instantly neutralized the gloominess of the room. He placed the cement candlestick on the nightstand, laid the hand-woven tapestry on the wooden floor of the living room, and put the potted plants in the corner of the balcony. This place, the cold and monotonous apartment, where I had lived alone for so long, under his careful touch, gradually gained the breath of life and the warmth of a home. At the same time, good news came from the legal team. After multiple rounds of difficult negotiations, they successfully reached a preliminary settlement agreement with the largest creditor, a commercial bank. The bank agreed that as long as Su Qingyan could pay off 20% of the principal debt within 3 months, they would apply to the court to temporarily remove his name from the enforcement blacklist. This would restore his basic civil rights, such as opening a bank account and taking high-speed trains and flights. This was undoubtedly a massive turning point, but that 20% of the principal was still an astronomical figure, enough to crush an ordinary person. The lawyer placed the thick stack of settlement documents and the debt list on the coffee table, his expression serious.
Mr.
"Chen, Miss Su, this is the best deal we could negotiate. You have 3 months. Once the deadline passes, all our previous efforts will go down the drain." Su Qingyan picked up the settlement agreement. Her fingers trembled slightly, and her face grew pale again. The hope that had just been kindled was ruthlessly crushed by this harsh reality. "I'll go sell everything we bought today." Her voice was hoarse. "My dad used to have some antiques abroad. It's not much, but I can try to track them down. Even if I sell it all, it should scrape together a little bit." Before she could even finish, her voice choked up. She knew better than anyone that selling those things would just be a drop in the bucket. I looked at her despairing expression, didn't say another word, turned around, and walked into the study. I took out my laptop, opened it, and pushed it toward her. On the screen was my stock trading interface,
My mutual fund portfolios.
and several investment agreements for startup companies. Over the years, aside from working myself to the bone, I had poured all my free time into the capital market, just like how I managed that 100,000 yuan back then. I stubbornly and meticulously managed every single penny of my income. The assets I had accumulated by now were far more than she could ever imagine. Su Qingyan stared at the screen. The numbers made her dizzy, leaving her so shocked she was speechless. Her lips trembled slightly. "Is this enough?" "It's enough to cover the first settlement payment, with plenty to spare." I closed the laptop, looked her in the eyes, and said firmly, I told you.
You owe money, we pay it back together.
That wasn't just empty talk, but this is your money. Her eyes were red, and her voice was full of resistance. I've already ruined my own life. I can't drag you down with me.
This isn't charity.
It's a fair investment. I looked at her and said, seriously? You can register a new design company called Qingyan Aesthetic Design.
You'll be the founder.
And the sole designer. I'll invest the capital to help you pay off your debts. Once the company is on track, I want 51% of the shares. Very fair, right? She froze, staring blankly at me, her eyes filled with shock and deep emotion. She finally understood me. I was using the coldest business logic to wrap the softest goodwill, just to protect that unyielding pride of hers. I have nothing left. No experience, no resources. Her voice choked up. I'm afraid I'll mess it up. You have talent.
I cut her off.
My voice firm. Your aesthetic sense, your abilities have never disappeared. They've just been overshadowed by your hardships. I believe in you, and you should believe in yourself too. She looked at me, stayed silent for a long time, and finally nodded hard. A single word, heavy as a mountain.
Okay.
From that day on, the atmosphere in the apartment completely changed. We were no longer landlord and consultant, no longer savior and the saved, but startup partners fighting side by side. Su Qingyan stopped wallowing in her past failures and threw herself wholeheartedly into preparing for the new company. She researched the market,
Analyze competitors.
and even tried reaching out to her old friends in the art circle. That decisive aura, the demeanor of a business elite, was slowly coming back. As for me, I handled the tedious financial and legal matters, sold off most of my stocks, pooled the capital, and poured it into our shared venture. Our lives gradually fell into sync with a shared goal. During the day, I handled my company's projects and matters related to the debt. When I came home at night, there was always a light on and a hot meal waiting for me. Su Qingyan started learning how to cook. She was a bit clumsy at first, occasionally burning a dish or forgetting to add salt, but I always ate every last bite. They were the best meals I had ever eaten, filled with her heart, and the unspoken feelings slowly blossoming between us. One evening, I came home late from working overtime. As soon as I pushed the door open, I smelled the rich aroma of food. Su Qingyan, wearing a slightly oversized cartoon apron, was bringing a plate of stir-fried potatoes out of the kitchen. Seeing me, she smiled hurriedly. I noticed you've been so busy lately, not eating properly, so I tried making this. I don't know if it suits your taste. On the dining table were 2 dishes and a soup. Besides the stir-fried potatoes, there was a plate of stir-fried shrimp and a bowl of pork rib soup. They were all simple, homey dishes, but they were steaming hot, so warm that it made my heart tremble. I sat down, picked up my chopsticks, and took a piece of potato. The taste was surprisingly good. It's delicious. I looked at her and said sincerely. She visibly breathed a sigh of relief, a faint smile appearing on her face. Back when I was studying abroad, I taught myself how to cook. I was homesick, so I'd make some home-cooked meals, tricking myself into thinking I was eating at home. This was the first time she had voluntarily brought up her life abroad. Her tone was calm, if she were telling someone else's story, but I could picture it. A girl who grew up pampered like a princess, all alone in a foreign land, learning to cook, learning to be independent, learning to face loneliness and hardship. We ate that meal in silence, but it was incredibly warm. After dinner, she insisted on washing the dishes. I didn't fight her on it, just leaned against the kitchen doorframe. Watching her roll up her sleeves, her busy silhouette by the sink, the light fell on her, gentle and beautiful. In that moment, I suddenly felt that the debts, the startup, none of it mattered anymore. I just wanted these peaceful, warm days to last a little longer, just a little bit longer. Time flew by, and our lives gradually got on track. Su Qingyan registered the company, built her personal design website, and on several art platforms, she posted her own spatial aesthetics, indirectly networking with the design community. Her talent was undeniable. She quickly attracted a fan base, and even a few small studios reached out to her to consult on interior design concepts. Meanwhile, the legal team used the leads we provided to initiate negotiations with the other creditors, and things were progressing smoothly. One weekend morning, Su Qingyan held a shopping list, walked up to me, waved it, and said, "The fridge is empty. Let's go to the supermarket and grab some groceries." I nodded and grabbed my car keys. This was the first time we acted like a normal couple, going to the supermarket together. The supermarket was bustling with people, full of the breath of everyday life. Su Qingyan pushed the shopping cart, seriously comparing items on the shelves. Carefully comparing the products on the shelves, she would hesitate over a few cents difference and choose a different brand of yogurt or buy an impractical imported pack of noodles just because the packaging was pretty. Sometimes she'd pick up a bag of snacks, hesitate for a moment, and put it back on the shelf, like a little adult who knew how to pinch pennies. I followed behind her, watching her look serious one second and playful the next. My heart was filled with tenderness. Just as we were lining up to pay, a doubtful voice came from beside us. "Chen Yan, Is that really you? I turned around and saw a woman with exquisite makeup, dressed head to toe in designer brands, looking at me in surprise. It was our college classmate, Li Ran, who used to be Su Qingyin's roommate. They didn't get along very well.
Long time no see.
I nodded politely, my tone flat. Li Ran's gaze swept past me and landed on Su Qingyin. When she got a clear look at Su Qingyin's face, her surprise instantly turned into undisguised shock, mixed with a hint of schadenfreude. Su Qingyin, oh my god, I thought I had the wrong person. How did you end up looking like this? She didn't finish her sentence. But that head-to-toe scrutinizing look and that mocking tone said it all. Su Qingyin was wearing a simple white t-shirt and jeans. She had no makeup on, even though her complexion was much better now. Compared to Li Ran, who was perfectly made up and draped in designer clothes, she still looked rather plain,
Even a bit haggard.
Su Qingyin's body stiffened, the color drained from her face. She reflexively took a step back, wanting to avoid Li Ran's gaze. Her fingertips clenched tightly, gripping the hem of her shirt. Her shoulders trembled slightly. I immediately took a step forward, casually blocking her from view. Cutting off Li Ran's uncomfortable stare, I said coldly, "Long time no see. We have things to do. Well, be going now." With that, I took the shopping cart from Su Qingyin's hands and pushed it, intending to leave. Don't be in such a rush to leave. Li Ran stepped up and blocked our path. "Old friends, huh?" Her tone was ambiguous and full of malice. "I heard your family went bankrupt, and your parents ran away. I never expected you to end up with Chen Yan.
You weren't like this back in the day?
You always used to look down on ordinary people like him." Her words were like needles, piercing fiercely into Su Qingyin's heart. I could feel the person behind me, trembling even more violently. I stopped in my tracks, turned around, and glared coldly at Li Ran. My voice carried an undeniable authority.
Li Ran, watch your mouth.
Qingyin is my partner now, and Shay's my family. I don't want to hear another word of insult directed at her. Those two words, my family, I said them decisively and firmly. Li Ran was intimidated by my icy glare and my imposing aura. She opened her mouth, but ultimately didn't dare say another word. I ignored her, gently grabbed Su Qingyin's freezing hand, and led her away amidst the strange looks of the people around us. We strode out of the supermarket. Back in the car, Su Qingyin didn't say a word. She just turned her head to look out the window. Her shoulders shook slightly. She choked back her sobs, keeping them trapped in her throat, only letting out tiny, stifled hiccups. I didn't start the engine. I didn't say anything either. I just gently held her hand tight. Her hand was freezing, still trembling nonstop. I knew that awkward encounter just now had once again torn apart the psychological defenses she had worked so hard to build. It cruelly reminded her that, in the eyes of some people, she was still a failure, a joke who had fallen from grace into the abyss. After a long time, she slowly turned her head, her eyes red as she looked at me. She asked, her voice choked with emotion, "Chen Yan, am I really that useless? To still be looked down on like this after everything?" "No, you're not."
I cut her off.
I reached out and gently wiped the tears from her face with my fingertips. My voice was gentle but firm. "They just don't understand you. They don't understand what you've been through. They don't understand how resilient you are." I said, "You're my family, so I won't let anyone bully you. I mean it. I keep my word." She looked at me. Tears streamed down her face again. Choking up, she asked the question she had buried in her heart for so long.
Why, Chen Yan?
Why are you so good to me?
"I don't deserve you doing all this for me." Looking at her tear-stained face, somewhere deep in my heart, it felt like something had pierced right through me. It had been 8 years. Since that game of Truth or Dare at the KTV back then, since the 100,000 yuan she gave me, there had always been a wall between us, a wall named debt and transaction. I had always carefully protected her pride, using the excuse of paying off my debt to stay by her side. But just now, the moment I said the words "my family," I knew I had shattered that wall with my own hands. I didn't look for any more excuses. I just reached out, gently cupped her face, leaned in, and slowly drew closer. It was so quiet in the car. Only the sound of our breathing remained. I pressed my lips against hers, very lightly, very gently, with a touch of heartache, with a touch of sincerity. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment impulse. It was a solemn declaration. 8 years late, her body suddenly stiffened. Her eyes widened in shock. Her lips were so cold, still tasting of salty tears, but they were so soft it made my heart ache. I slowly pulled back, rested my forehead against hers, looked into those bewildered eyes, and said in a low, serious voice, "Because 8 years ago, from the moment I took your 100,000 yuan, you were no longer just my creditor. You were the only ray of light in my dark youth, the only direction I could see. When I was drowning in the mud, the only person I wanted to reach. After 8 years of relentless effort, my words were like a stone, thrown into the quiet lake of her heart, creating ripples upon ripples." She looked at me silently, her mind completely blank, tears still falling endlessly, but no longer out of despair. After a long while, she finally spoke slowly, her voice hoarse. I never knew that. Was that money really that important to you? Back then, I was just acting on a whim, casually saying you didn't have to pay it back. I didn't even take a serious look at you once. I know. I gently wiped away her tears, smiling as I said, you were so arrogant back then, like a haughty princess. You'd never spare a glance for a poor student like me. But little did you know, that 100,000 yuan you casually handed me gave me a chance to crawl out of the mud. Every day I studied like my life depended on it, worked like my life depended on it, refusing to slack off even for a second.
I wanted to get better. Faster.
To catch up to you faster, to quickly earn the right to stand in front of you and look you in the eye, and then pay back everything I owed you with dignity and grace. It took me 8 years, but I finally caught up to you. But I never expected that. I'd suddenly feel like this once cold house. Because of her, finally felt like a home. The next morning, I went to work as usual. Before heading out, I gently patted her head. I told her to come home early and rest. She nodded, a faint smile blooming on her face, her eyes brimming with tenderness. It was a peaceful tenderness I had never seen before. After I left, for the first time, he didn't just sit blankly on the sofa. Instead, he unconsciously walked into my bedroom. My bedroom was very simple, minimalist in style. Everything was neatly and meticulously arranged. Much like my own personality, serious and restrained. On the bed lay the pajamas I had just taken off, still holding my body heat and the faint scent of my woody cologne. He unconsciously stepped closer, buried his face in them, and took a deep breath. His cheeks instantly burned hot. So this is what having a crush feels like.
So sweet.
So panic-inducing, so bewildering. Like a thief caught in the act, he quickly put the pajamas back in their place and hurriedly fled the bedroom, but his heart was pounding wildly in his chest, refusing to calm down. Just as he was feeling restless, a call from the lawyer pulled him back to reality.
Mr. Su, hello.
The lawyer's voice was steady and calm. The bank has confirmed the consolidation agreement. Right now, we need you to provide some of your company's asset documents from previous years, especially the documents related to overseas assets. This is absolutely crucial for our next round of negotiations. Do you happen to remember where these documents were usually kept? Su Qingyan's expression shifted slightly. After a moment of silence, he said softly, my father had a secret safe. It wasn't kept at the company, nor at our previous residence, but at our family's old estate in the suburbs. All right, I understand, the lawyer replied. I will immediately file a motion with the court, citing the search for crucial evidence, to grant us temporary access to that old estate. Please get ready. We will likely need you there in person. To confirm the location of the safe, hanging up the phone, Su Qingyan's mood sank. That old estate held all the beautiful memories of his childhood. It was also the place that witnessed his family's rise to glory and their eventual downfall. His childhood swing was there, the lawn where his 18th coming-of-age ceremony was held, and the joyful laughter of him and his parents. But now, only desolation remained. It had become a pile of ruins. He felt a bit afraid, but he still gathered the courage to call me and tell me everything. On the other end of the line, I stayed silent for a moment, then said firmly, I'll take time off. To go with you? There is no need, he quickly said. You're so busy with work. I can go by myself. No. I cut him off. I'm going with you. No matter where it is, I won't let you face it alone. He didn't refuse anymore. A soft, choked sob came from the other end of the line. It was out of being moved, and a sense of relief. 2 days later, I, Su Qingyan, and the lawyer stood together in front of the old estate's iron gates. The court officials had arrived beforehand and removed the seal on the door, standing to the side, supervising with expressionless faces. Su Qingyan looked at the familiar carved iron gates, at the weed-overgrown lawn in the yard, and at the long-rotted swing. His eyes instantly welled up with tears. Every blade of grass, every tree here, was engraved with his memories, engraved with his family's past glory. But now, the scenery remained while the people were gone, leaving behind only endless desolation and sorrow. His legs felt like lead, unable to take a single step, his body trembling slightly. I gently took his hand, squeezing it tightly to give him strength. Without saying a word, I just led him step by step, walking into this old house that was both familiar and foreign. The inside of the house was covered in a thick layer of dust. All the furniture was draped in white cloth. Like silent ghosts, the air was thick with the smell of old dust, making one's heart feel heavy. Relying on his memory, Su Qingyan led us up to the second floor, heading to a small room hidden deep inside his father's study. It was his father's private collection room. The walls used to be covered with paintings and photos, but now only empty frames remained. Looking incredibly bleak, he walked up to a wall, following the sequence in his memory. At a row of books disguised as a mechanism, he entered the passcode. With a click, the wall slowly slid to the side, revealing a massive built-in wall safe. The lawyer and the court officials all looked astonished. Su Qingyan took a deep breath, turned the combination dial, and pulled open the heavy safe door. Inside, there wasn't the gold, silver, or jewels one might imagine. There were only neatly stacked files and a few velvet boxes. He picked up one of the boxes and opened it. Inside lay a crystal necklace, resting quietly. It was his mother's favorite piece of jewelry. An anniversary gift from his father to his mother. In another box was a men's watch, the gift he had given his father for his 18th birthday. It turned out that to his father, the most precious things were never those expensive collections, but these small items filled with family love. Su Qingyan couldn't hold back his tears any longer. Drop by drop, they fell onto the velvet box, his shoulders shaking violently. I stepped up from behind and gently wrapped my arms around him, resting my chin on the top of his head, using my body heat to silently comfort him. In that moment in this cold room, filled with painful memories, he felt for the first time an unprecedented sense of security and warmth. The lawyer stepped forward, carefully flipping through the documents. A relieved smile appeared on his face.
Mr. Su, Mr.
Chen.
This is indeed a crucial discovery. These documents prove that before the incident happened to the company, your father had legally established an asset separation mechanism. It wasn't an intentional concealment of assets. Legally speaking, this can give us a massive advantage. Our chances of winning the negotiation with the bank are now much higher. This is definitely the first ray of light at the end of the tunnel. Although to completely resolve the debt issue, there is still a long road ahead. At least we can see hope now. As we left the old estate, Su Qingyan turned his head to look back. The building looked even more desolate under the setting sun. The sorrow in his eyes was gradually replaced by a sense of peace. Perhaps the best way to say goodbye to the past isn't to forget it, but to bravely carry those most precious memories with you, and take them along as you courageously move forward. And by his side, there was already someone ready to walk that path with him. On the way back, Su Qingyan kept leaning on my shoulder. Without saying a word, the car rolled slowly under the twilight. Our shadows stretched out long, leaning close together, never to be separated again. The days seemed to hit the fast-forward button. Everything was developing in a positive direction. The legal team utilized the documents found at the old estate to launch a new round of negotiations with the bank, and the progress was incredibly smooth. As for Su Qingyan, he finally welcomed a new opportunity in his career. A week later, he received a call from an unknown number. The caller was the manager of a boutique hotel. They had seen his articles on spatial aesthetics and his design sketches online, greatly admired his perspective, and wanted to invite him to provide the interior design plan for the hotel's newly opened VIP lounge. Hanging up the phone, Su Qingyan jumped up and down in the living room with excitement, his eyes brimming with joy and light. He dashed into the study, throwing his arms around me while I was reviewing documents, his voice choked with emotion. Chen Yan. I got a commission. I got my very first design commission. I was knocked off balance by his sudden tackle, but I immediately reacted, a genuine smile breaking out on my face. I held his shoulders, looking at his face flushed with excitement, my eyes full of admiration and pride. I knew you could do it. In the days that followed, Su Qingyan poured his heart and soul into this design project. He stayed up all night for several days straight, researching a massive amount of data, revising dozens of design sketches, tweaking them over and over again to perfect the plan. Even when he hit a bottleneck and felt anxious and restless, he never once thought about giving up. I didn't interfere with any of his design decisions. I just quietly brought him a glass of hot milk. When he was pulling all-nighters, when he was feeling restless, I'd pull him outside for a walk, telling him funny stories from work to help shift his focus. When he ran into difficulties, I'd brainstorm with him, giving him encouragement and support. Half a month later, Su Qingyan brought a thick stack of documents, what could be considered a flawless design plan. To meet with the hotel manager, the manager was extremely satisfied with his proposal and signed the contract on the spot. The advanced design fee was quickly transferred into the company account of Qingyan Design Aesthetics. When Su Qingyan received the bank notification and saw the first income hit his account, tears of emotion fell once again. This wasn't just a sum of money. It was a validation of his talent. It was proof that he had stood back up on his own 2 feet, proving that Su Qingyan was not some freeloader who only knew how to rely on others. He could use his own 2 hands, use his own talent to create his own value. He grabbed his phone, dashed out of the apartment, ran all the way to the ground floor of my company building, and called me. His tone was urgent and thrilled. Chen Yan, come downstairs for a sec.
Right now?
A few minutes later, I hurried out of the high-rise building and saw him standing there, his face beaming with a bright smile, his eyes sparkling with light, looking just like a kid who had scored perfect marks on his report card.
What's wrong? What happened?
I quickened my pace and walked up to him, a hint of worry in my voice. He didn't say a word. He just stood on his tiptoes, and right there, in front of all the passers-by, planted a loud, sweet kiss on my lips. Then, he shoved his phone screen in front of my face, his eyes brimming with pride. Chen Yan, look, I made money. I earned money all by myself with my own talent. I looked at the numbers on the screen, then back at his radiant face. I was stunned for a moment, then burst out laughing. My laughter was full of joy and pure affection. Good job, my love. I gently ruffled his hair, smiling as I asked, what do you want to eat tonight?
My treat.
No need for you to treat me. He shook his head, his eyes full of laughter. Tonight, it's my treat. Let's go home. I'll make your favorite red bean porridge for you. I'll even put in double the red beans. How about that? I took his hand, holding it tightly in my palm. Let's go home. As dusk fell, the golden sunset cast its glow over us. Our shadows stretched out long. Leaning close together, I knew that those dark, arduous days were finally over. I knew that between me and Su Qingyan, the debt and salvation that had spanned 3 long years had finally reached a perfect, happy ending. And I knew even better that our future would be filled with sunshine and hope. There would be countless warm days waiting for us to walk through together.